No, we're not in the...
Hi, everyone. This is Kathleen with Udacity on the scholarships team. Thank you all for joining my webinar today on crafting a killer resume. I'm super excited to be talking to you all about this topic. Before we jump in, I want to put in a plug for Trin's awesome webinar this morning for those of you who are unable to join live. It was really awesome. She went into more detail about how to map out your career plan and shared a lot of great tips and advice. So if you haven't seen that yet, definitely check it out. The link is the same as the one that you used to enter live. So that's posted on the Google site in announcements and is also in the email that we sent to you earlier this week. So before we dive in, I want to share a little bit just about my experience so you know why I'm here and why I have any qualifications to be talking to you about this topic. So before I worked at Udacity, I worked at a technical training nonprofit for 3 years where I was a career coach. And while I was there, I worked with young people who were working on starting their careers in tech. So specifically helping them prepare for interviews, help them with their resumes, help them figure out how to network, how to build a professional network and stand out, build their professional brands, all of that. And on the other side, I also worked really closely with recruiters, dozens of recruiters here in the Bay Area for a lot of the big tech companies here. And so from that experience, I gained a lot of insight into what recruiters are looking for in resumes and what helps resumes stand out. And I also got a lot of feedback from those recruiters and those hiring managers about what are some mistakes and what are some good things to do in your resume. So hopefully that, sorry, there's some background noise here. You're hearing the city streets of San Francisco. So hopefully you are able to gain some helpful insight from this. And I also want to say that the feedback that I'm sharing with you here is just feedback that I've heard. There's a lot of right ways to write a resume, and resume norms vary by field. So if this is different from what you've maybe heard previously, then know that the feedback that I'm sharing is specifically on tech resumes, and there's a lot of nuances to resume writing that can cause some variations. So just a caveat and a disclaimer before we dive in. So I'm going to share a presentation with you. Awesome. So let's dive in. So today we're going to talk about the purpose and components of a resume. We're going to talk about how to stand out from a group of equally qualified candidates and also more qualified candidates. We're going to talk about how to write a tech resume when you've never actually worked in tech. We're going to go over some do's and don'ts. I have some resources to share with you all, and then we're going to do some Q&A at the end. So to start off with purpose and components of a resume, what a resume is it should convince the reader that you are a qualified candidate for a specific job opportunity and that they should choose you to interview instead of somebody else. A resume is not a summary of every job you've ever had. It shouldn't read like a job description, and you really want it to highlight your accomplishments. I always like to say that you should think of your resume like a teaser trailer. The interview is like the full trailer, the 2-minute trailer, and then you on the job is the feature film. Your resume should give them just enough information to show to hook them in and to show them that you're qualified for the job and to make them want to learn more about you. This said, your resume does not need to be a full or comprehensive summary of everything you've ever done. So when you're thinking about writing your resume, your top 3 priorities should be your power statements, your skills, and your formatting. So power statements can be thought of as like the bullets to your resume. And again, they're not a description of your responsibilities. They should answer the question, what value do you bring to a company? So things like if you made a previous company money, or if you saved time or efficiency, or if you were able to increase the brand recognition, these are all great accomplishments that you want to share in your power statements. You don't want to just say what was in the job description of the role that you applied for. Skills should have their own section. If you don't have a lot of skills, then they don't need to have their own section, but they should always be included in your power statements as qualifiers. And I'm going to go over what a qualifier is in a few minutes. Your skills are really important because they highlight how you can do things and they help set you apart from other candidates. A lot of times recruiters are going to be looking for keywords in your resume in the form of skills. So having those keywords on your resume helps it pop. I always recommend not putting soft skills on your resume. Things like being a self-starter, a strong communicator, a team player. Those are great skills to have, but they're kind of vague and they don't really capture people's attention like hard technical skills have. So if you want to highlight your soft skills, you can do that through writing power statements, which we'll talk more about in just a minute. And then the last thing is formatting. So contrary to popular belief, you don't need advanced graphic design skills or some crazy delivery message like sending your resume as a paper plane to a hiring manager. Your resume can get attention by just having a super clean, legible font and format. And I always say cleaner is better. Unless you're applying for a job in the graphic design field or the UI field, you don't need some like cool, crazy, creative, artsy format to your resume. They should always be one page in tech. Even if you are in your mid-50s and you have over 30 years of professional experience, they still should really only be one page. Your LinkedIn and your portfolio are a great place to go into more depth about your other work experience. And if your resume goes over one page, then you run the risk of it just not really getting a lot of attention from recruiters. So diving into power statements a little bit more, because from my experience, I've seen that this has been this can be tricky for a lot of people to write power statements that really stand out. So the main ingredients of your power statements are action verbs, which kick off the power statement and introduce what you did. You want these to be really punchy and exciting and cool. You don't want words like helped or supported, things like that. Even if that is what you did, try to think of a better way to say it that really stands out and catches somebody's eye. The two components that make up kind of the middle of your power statements generally are quantifiers and qualifiers. Quantifiers are exactly what they sound like. They are numbers that describe your work. So frequency, amount, dollars, percentages, things like that. Qualifiers also describe your work, but with non-numbers. So these are things like software, tools, coding languages, titles, things like that. And then every power statement ideally should have a result. And the result is really about your impact. What was the outcome that you achieved? What did you contribute to the team? And this is what makes your power statement stand out, because it takes a responsibility, what you were responsible for, and makes it into a value add. And ultimately, companies want to hire people who can add value to their teams. And so if you can highlight the way that you've done that at a previous company, that's going to help your resume really stand out for other companies. So generally, when you're writing your power statements, these ingredients will show up in this order, but not always. I like this formula as a way to kind of highlight how you can form your power statements. So action verb plus qualifiers and quantifiers plus results equals an awesome power statement. Super simple. You can also sometimes start with the result. So if you had a job where you were responsible for bringing in over $1 million in revenue, then maybe you want to start your power statement with that, because that's really impressive. Also, similarly, you might have some experiences where you just can't quantify what you did. That's okay. Do your best, but you don't want to make anything up. So if you can have a quantifier, great, but sometimes some of these components might need to be missing, but do your best to include all of them because they really help your power statement stand out. So just to practice a little bit, I have two power statements here, and I want you to take a minute and try to identify the different components. So remember, we're looking for action verbs, quantifiers, qualifiers, and results. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute to look through these two power statements, and you can write it down in your head. If you want to put it in the chat, feel free to identify the different parts of these power statements. All right, so let's go through this together. So here's what you might have come up with. So this kind of highlights how these two power statements are broken down into action verbs, quantifiers and qualifiers, and results. And both of them are super concise and short, just 2 lines each, but they have a ton of information in them. So the first one starts out with built, which is a strong independent action verb, followed by 6 mobile websites, which is a quantifier and a qualifier combined into one. So you can combine them. 6 websites would be the quantifier, and the qualifier would be mobile. They're not just any 6 websites, they're specifically mobile websites. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and MoveWeb are all qualifiers. They're tools. They talk about how this person was able to do this. And then the result is bringing the site from ideation phase to launch within 3 months. With launch within 3 months is really the key result that they're looking for. So whenever you're going through, if you're looking at people's power statements on LinkedIn just to get ideas, look at what they have written on their LinkedIns, but then also think about ways that they could be improved, additional details that could be injected in there, and think about how you can incorporate that into your own power statements. So I want to talk about how you can stand out from a group of equally qualified candidates. And I got a lot of questions from you all about this. And I think for folks who are either transitioning to a different field of tech or who are entering tech for the first time, it can feel really intimidating when you're thinking about standing out, when you have limited experience, or maybe your experience doesn't exactly align with what you want to do. So I want to share a statistic with you and about how long recruiters spend looking at resumes. So take a few seconds to think about it. How long do you think the average recruiter spends looking at a resume before making a decision whether or not to move them on? So if you have your answer in your head, great, hold on to it. The correct answer is 6 seconds. That is not a lot of time. So within 6 seconds, a recruiter will generally make a decision about whether or not they want to pass you on to the hiring manager, or whether or not you're a good fit for the role. A lot of recruiters, if they're asked, say that they spend closer to 4 to 5 minutes reviewing a resume. So it's important to be aware of this, because even if you think your resume is it has people spending a long time reviewing it, that's probably not the case. So in other words, your resume really needs to catch people's eyes and do it super quickly. And this also means that about probably 95% of what's on your resume won't really be read by the first person to make a decision about you as a candidate. So how can you stand out when you only have 6 seconds? And I don't say this to discourage you, because there's definitely ways to stand out. So most people read from top to bottom, and they've done studies. What's at the top of your resume is going to have the most views. So you want your most relevant experience at the top, even if it's not the most recent experience. Your relevance is more important than your chronology. Projects, freelance, and pro bono work absolutely count. Something that I recommend, if you don't have a ton of work experience in the tech field or doing what you hope to be doing next, then you can divide your resume into sections for relevant experience and then previous experience. And that's a great way to lump in maybe the projects that you've done with some limited work experience, but have those things at the top of your resume so that people aren't distracted by other experience that might not be as relevant. Eye-catching language is really important. We talked about action verbs. Starting out those power statements with a strong action verb is going to really help people lock on to your power statements and focus on what's important. You also want to avoid using verbs in the progressive tense. It's also known as verbs with ing. So building, coding, things like that. You want to say build, code. Present or past tense is good. It just has, it grabs people's attention more than having verbs in the progressive tense. Another way to catch people's eye is to mirror the language in the job that you're applying for. So what I do is anytime I'm applying for a job, I print out the job description and I take a highlighter and I highlight or underline keywords in the job description that stand out to me. So when I'm writing my resume, I can use those specific words in my resume. And this might be obvious to the recruiter, but that's okay. It's a good thing. So you don't want to plagiarize and copy the job description word by word, but don't be afraid to use a lot of the same language, because recruiters have hardwired themselves to look for these really specific keywords. And if you put those in your resume, it makes it a lot easier for them to make a decision about whether or not you're qualified for the role. Every resume should be tailored to the job that you're applying for. So you should really never send in the same resume to 2 different jobs unless the 2 job descriptions are almost identical. Spending an extra 15, 20 minutes to tailor your resume before sending it in can make a huge difference. And then finally, you want your resume to look good. And again, this doesn't have to be in the form of some crazy format or colors or creative delivery method. You really just want it to look neat and clean. I think a minimalist resume design is always the safest way to go. Your spelling and grammar should be impeccable. English is notoriously complicated when it comes to grammar. So if English grammar is not your strong suit, or whatever language you're applying for a job in, have a friend proofread it. We all have those friends who are super critical about grammar and correct us all the time. So tap into them, ask them for help, ask for a family member to help you out, and take a look at your resume. It's worth it. Another trick that I recommend is reading from the bottom up. Sometimes your brain gets used to reading the same thing in order, and if you start at the bottom and work your way up, I always find more mistakes when I do that than when I go from top to bottom. And then another plug for keeping it to one page. They really should always be one page. Those 6 seconds is not a lot of time, and if you have multiple pages, the recruiter's not going to have a chance to look at your second page, and they might see that you have a second page and just disqualify you altogether because they don't have the time to really look over your resume in depth. And if you want your resume to look good or look different, I guess, and stand out, a lot of people asked about having a pop on your resume. I recommend just putting your header, your name and your headers in one color. So something, when I was applying for Udacity, Udacity's colors are blue. And so I used a kind of similar shade of blue on my resume just to mirror the brand of the company that I was applying to. A few years ago, I was applying to environmental organizations and I used green. So just be thoughtful about the color you're using. You don't want to use, a super neon or distracting color, and you don't want a ton of different colors on your resume, but that can be a great way just to get your name to stand out and to add a little pop and personality without going overboard. So moving on to how you can write a tech resume when you've never actually worked in tech. So this is really where transferable skills come in. And transferable skills are skills that are not specific to one specific job or field. They're considered portable from one job to another. So here on the left side, there's 3 different fields, not in tech, or not necessarily in tech. And on the right, there's 3 different technical jobs. So think about some of the skills that you need for careers in accounting and finance, retail and customer service, and healthcare, the medical field. And think about how the skills that you might use in those jobs could prepare you for a career in software testing, UX, UI design, management. So going through these one by one, and this isn't a comprehensive list, some of the skills that you might use in accounting and finance are attention to detail and documentation. For anyone who's ever worked with money, you know that being super attentive to detail is extremely important, and also having a really strong paper trail is important too. The same thing is true in software testing and in quality assurance. If you're responsible for catching mistakes that other people are making before a software or product goes live, if you don't have a strong attention to detail, then you're not going to be very good at that job. So being able to highlight that you have this experience from previous roles and tying it into how that can help you in a software testing role is a great way to stand out as a candidate, even when you don't have directly relevant or applicable experience. Same thing with retail and customer service and UX and UI design. So some of the things that you might use in retail, customer service, if you've ever worked in store retail, like I did for many years, you are probably familiar with how the store setups are done at the front of the store to promote certain items and to get people to want to buy them. And a lot of times stores will do this in a really creative way to grab people's attention. Same thing with UX and UI design. It's all about grabbing the customer, grabbing the person who's visiting that website in, and making it easy to use and making them want to come back for more. It's also about user satisfaction. If somebody visits a website, are they happy when they use it? If somebody's using a software product for their work, does it help them do their job? Are they satisfied with it? Can you understand what people want and need? And so those are all skills that come into play in the retail and customer service field, and that can also be useful in the UX and UI design field. And then finally, healthcare in the medical field and technical project management. Triaging or prioritizing issues and delegating to team members are some skills that could come into play. So being able to make decisions under a lot of pressure, fast pace, taking responsibility and ownership for other people's actions, things like that are really important in the medical field and then also in the technical project management field. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just to give you an idea of some of the ways that you can kind of zoom out of your previous experience, think about what you're good at and what skills you built, and apply them to fields that you want to transition into. So some other ways that you can stand out. And I always say that your resume should just be one part of your professional brand and your professional package. So have a website, have a portfolio to highlight all of the projects that you've done. Make sure that the link to this is on your resume and easy to find. Make sure it's also on your LinkedIn. And just because you haven't been paid for work doesn't mean that it's irrelevant to a job that you're applying for. So if you're looking for projects or ways to get more hands-on work experience in a field, think about if there's a school in your town or a nonprofit organization or maybe a softball team that you're a part of and they need a website for whatever reason, or they want an app to complement their website. Is this something that you can do? Are there creative ways that you can help them out while also applying your skills? And then in exchange, you could always ask to advertise yourself on their website. So that's a way to kind of get experience, do work, and put something concrete on your resume without having a company specifically hire you to do that. And similarly, if you did a project just for fun because you wanted to try it out, if the skills that you used to do that project would be valuable to an employer, by all means, put it on your resume. That's all important work to have. And then you also want to be consistent in your brand and network and make sure that people know about you and know about your brand. And Trin talked about this a little more this morning, and there's a lot more about building your brand in your career lessons. But you want your resume, your LinkedIn, your portfolio, any online presence to reflect a really consistent brand. So you shouldn't have work experience on your resume that isn't on your LinkedIn. And your LinkedIn shouldn't say that you are a professional dog walker if your resume is geared towards finding a job in tech. So you want there to be consistency across all of your professional branding tools. And don't be shy. I've talked to a lot of people who are nervous to reach out. They're nervous to ask for help. They're nervous to put themselves out there because they feel like they haven't done enough projects or they aren't cool enough or impressive enough. Just do it. Get yourself out there, because the longer you wait, the harder it will be. No one's gonna knock on your door with a job opportunity. So you really have to put yourself out there, and your brand will grow and refine itself over time. But the best way to get feedback and learn what you can do, what else you can do to make your resume stand out, to make your professional brand stand out, is to just really get yourself out there. So don't be worried about that. So I want to talk about some do's and don'ts on your resume. And we've talked about a lot of these so far, but I have some extra ones that we haven't really gone into depth on quite as much yet. So for do's, you should have contact information on your resume. Make sure your email's professional. If you're still using your high school soccerstar88@hotmail.com email address, it's time to upgrade. Make sure that it is just your name or your initials and numbers. Keep it really simple and professional. City and state is important. Trin also talked about this a little bit earlier in her presentation. If you live out of state, depending on the company, they might be nervous about hiring somebody who who might be asking them to pay for relocation. So if you're applying for jobs outside of your state, try to see if you have a friend or somebody who lives there, and you can put their city and state on your resume, just as a way to kind of calm any of those concerns that they might have if you know you're going to be moving there. Also make sure that your website and your LinkedIn are on your resume. I also always recommend updating your resume every couple months, especially because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity and you want your resume to be ready to go. But if you only update your resume every 2 years, then thinking about all of the quantifiers from projects that you did might be a little bit hard. So do it. I always do this every 2 to 3 months. Even if I don't write a full power statement, I just jot down the key accomplishments. That way, when I do need to write that power statement, I have all the data there from when it was fresh in my memory. I also keep a running master resume. So my master resume is probably, I think, 5 to 6 pages long. And this has every job I've ever had. It has every accomplishment that I had at every job. And this makes it really easy when I need to create a new resume. I can just pull those power statements in, tweak the language a little bit to reflect the job description, and it's a lot faster than having to start from scratch. Submitting your resume as a PDF is good because sometimes software is incompatible, and if you submit it in a Word document or another format, it could lose some of that formatting. You do want to include any professional associations or memberships or relevant volunteer work on your resume. Again, I would say keep it relevant. So if you're part of a club, like a I don't know, a softball club or something like that, to use that as an example. Maybe that doesn't need to go on your resume unless you know that somebody on the team that you're applying for is really into softball. That could be a great way to stand out. So kind of I want to emphasize the professional part of the associations or memberships here. Include your challenge course and any other trainings that you've done. So the challenge course that you spent the past 3 months on absolutely should go on your resume. If you've taken other free courses through Udacity or other platforms, put those on your resume. They definitely have a place there, as do any maybe more formal training experiences that you've had. I got a lot of questions about gaps in employment. And so for folks who have been out of the workforce for a while, try a skills-based resume. And there's a link in here to a Muse article that goes into more depth on how you can write a skills-based resume. But this kind of deprioritizes the times when you're working at a company and highlights your project's accomplishments and skills, and is really good for people who took time off from the workforce for a variety of reasons. That's definitely not a disqualifier when applying for jobs, but gaps in employment can raise questions on your resume, and a skills-based resume is a really good way to highlight what you bring to the table while minimizing any gaps in employment that you have. And finally, for do's, I've said this a bunch of times, I'll say it a million more times: proofread, proofread, proofread. If you're applying to be a developer, that is an extremely detail-oriented career. And if you can't take the time to proofread your resume and make sure that it is absolutely impeccable, that's not going to send the message that you want to send about your professional brand or your reliability as an employee. It's worth spending the extra time reading through it a dozen different times just to make sure that everything is perfect. And you don't want that to be the reason that you don't get a call back for an interview. So some don'ts. Just like you do want to include some contact information about yourself, you don't want to include other information about yourself, including your photo, exact mailing address, just city and state is fine, links to your social media accounts, unless your social media is only used for professional things, and any other information that discloses aspects of your identity. And there's a couple reasons for this. The mailing address is just about your privacy. You don't need to put it on your resume, so there's no need to put more information about yourself out into the world than you need to. Social media could be considered unprofessional if the accounts that you're sharing aren't that you're trying to do. And then things like photos or other aspects of your identity, I recommend, just as a way to protect yourself. Bias is real, and discrimination and hiring happens, unfortunately. So if you have your photo or anything else on your resume that might disclose aspects of your identity, like age, race, gender, physical ability, that could, you don't want to run the risk of that working against you in any way. So I hate that I have to say that, but it is true. And there's no reason that an employer would need to know any of that information about you early on in the hiring phase anyway. You don't want to send the same resume in for every job. I said that before, but I'll say it again because it's super important. Take the time to tailor your resume. If you include interests or hobbies, make sure they're relevant ones. If you love reading, great. Probably doesn't need to go on your resume unless you're applying for a job at a publishing company. So if you know that the hiring manager is really into something, so if you know, for example, that they're into cycling and you're really into cycling, feel free to put that on your resume, but otherwise it probably doesn't need to go on there. If you have a summary on your resume, make sure it's really tailored and targeted to the job you're applying for. It shouldn't be vague or generic. It should be different than your LinkedIn summary. Your LinkedIn summary can be vague and generic because it's, kind of it's out there for the world to see, whereas your resume should have it be really tailored. Don't use personal pronouns or periods. There's kind of grammar rules that apply to resumes that don't apply to other types of writing. And so those are kind of just two no-nos in resume writing practices. Never lie. There's ways that employers can find out about lies, no matter how well you think you're lying. It's not worth the risk. Don't include references or salary expectations. These come later on in the interview process. You never need to put this on your resume up front. And again, don't rely solely on your resume to get you a job. It is just one aspect of your professional toolkit and should really be, again, the teaser trailer in grabbing people's attention and wanting to make them learn more about you. So we have some resources to share with you, and This PowerPoint will be accessible to you all. We'll make sure that it gets posted to the Slack channels and on the website. The career lessons are already in your classroom. I've heard a bunch of people have started those, which is great. Keep doing them. They're awesome. The Udacity Career Resource Center is another great tool. This is available to everyone, and you can find more tips on job searching, how to plan out your career steps, where you can review. There's actual job postings that you can apply to, so definitely check that out. My personal formula for a winning resume is an article by Laszlo Bock, who's a former SVP of People Ops at Google, and he goes into a little more depth about power statements. So if you have more questions about that, that's a great place to go. I put together a list of action verbs that you can use to help you start your power statements with a bang. Not comprehensive, but hopefully is a good start and gives you some punchy ideas of ways to make your verbs stand out. There's a link here to Inside the Mind of a Recruiter, which is an interview with Jason Wong, who's the head of recruiting here at Udacity. And he just talks a little bit more about what recruiters are looking for. And then for those of you who are on Trin's webinar this morning, she talked about the Freelance Toolkit, which is a really awesome resource. So we will share it. Also, that will be shared out via Slack and on the website. But I'm putting it here also because that's a really cool thing to look for. So I have some questions that all of you asked, and then I want to open it up for some live questions too. But there were some really, really great ones that I wanted to be sure to touch on because I saw some repeat questions that it seemed like a lot of people were curious about. So first question is, what are the odds of someone without a bachelor's degree and no relevant work experience getting an interview with companies like Google or Amazon? Great question. I think like a dozen people asked this one. So I would say number one is always, and this is true of getting into any company, is networking. Your resume alone is not going to be enough to get you a job at a major tech company. I looked up the stats earlier, and Google gets 2 million job applications a year. So it's great to have big goals and set your sights high. But I also recommend looking at smaller companies that are closer to home or that might give you more opportunity to build your skills. It would be amazing to work at Google or Amazon or Microsoft or Facebook or any of those companies. But a lot of times smaller companies might have a little bit more flexibility in terms of giving you opportunity to work on stretch projects and continuing to build your skills. And Trin had talked about that earlier, about how her manager gives her a lot of opportunities to build her skills in ways that she might not get at another company. And so look at smaller companies too, because you might have a really, really great work experience there. And it's also just going to be a lot less competitive when you're applying. If you're super committed to working at Google or Amazon or any of the other big tech companies, networking is going to be the most surefire way to get your foot in the door. So you want your resume to be perfect, but that's probably going to be one of the least important aspects of standing out there. And really making sure that you know people who can refer you internally or let you know when a job opens up. And that's, again, true of any company that you're going for. So the next question is, can we put freelance web developer as a job on our resume for the time we spend building sample projects to put in our portfolio that were not made for real clients or a job? The answer is yes. Again, I recommend having multiple sections on your resume if you don't have a ton of prior developer experience. Having one section that says relevant experience and then another section that has other professional experience on your resume can be a great way to break up your more project-based work and then your actual employment history. But those things absolutely can go on your resume. Anything that highlights your skills and the value that you can add to a company has a place on your resume. The next question was, what is the best way to add skills / programming languages that you are presently learning? And what can you say, and when can you say you know a programming language on your resume? So these are actually two separate questions that I combined into one because they seem kind of similar. I would say when you're constructing your resume, the hierarchy should be relevance, but it should also be what you're best at. So if you're applying for a job that is looking for somebody who is, fluent in Python and you're a beginner in Python, that you might not want to necessarily highlight that skill first if it's not something that you are really, really good at. So put the skills that you're most fluent in first. Ideally, the things that you're best at and that are most relevant to the job go first. But I would say fluency can come first. If you're learning something and you don't have any experience applying it in a job setting, then you can always put it in your skills section and put your proficiency level in parentheses next to it. So I have here Python and then beginner in parentheses. You could do intermediate, advanced. Ideally, whenever you have a skill on your resume, though, it's also in your power statements where you can go into a little bit more detail about how you've applied that skill. But sometimes, especially if it's just something that you're learning in a more educational setting, you might not have had the opportunity to apply it yet. So you can just have it in your skills section as a standalone if that's the case. And to answer the second part of the question, when can you put something on your resume? I would say at any point you feel confident about being able to apply it in a work setting. This doesn't mean that you have to be an expert, but if you feel like you could go into a company and use that skill to solve problems that the company might be facing, then go for it. Put it on your resume. That's totally fine. Just be prepared to answer questions about anything that you have on your resume. So if it's on your resume, you should be at least semi-well versed in it, but you definitely don't have to be an expert. The next question is, how can I play up the strengths a self-taught developer has with, oops, sorry, that is a typo, with little to no professional experience? So I would say being a self-taught developer is a strength in and of itself. It takes, I mean, all of you know how much motivation it takes to continue your learning on top of having a full-time job, maybe multiple full-time jobs, being a parent, caring for a relative, just all of the other curveballs that life throws at you. So the fact that you're able to take the time out of your schedule to teach yourself these skills is a huge testament to your motivation, your grit, your desire to learn. So you don't have to hide being a self-taught developer. I think that is a huge strength in and of itself. Really highlight the projects that you did, all of your education, which includes Udacity and free courses, online courses, all of that. And make sure that your website or portfolio is really easy to find. And don't shy away from the fact that you've taught yourself all of this, because in a lot of ways that's more impressive than somebody who, maybe has a more traditional formal education background, which they were able to focus on full time. It's really hard to learn on top of, again, a full-time job, having a family, all of that. So that's definitely something that you can highlight to employers. The next question is, how do I make sure a potential employer can see past what is written on paper and see the potential in the person behind what is written on the paper? So this is hard because, again, if you're just sending in your resume and assuming that the recruiter is only looking at it for 6 seconds, even if we're going to be generous and say 30 seconds, if you're only relying on your resume, it's going to be hard to stand out, which is why it's really important to network, to do projects, volunteer, find ways that you can highlight all of the strengths that you bring to the table in a way that's authentic to you, and that are also professionally appealing. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, then find a way that you can do that and also incorporate the skills that you want to build. So when people see that on their resume and they see that, oh, you volunteer as a teacher's aide in a local school teaching tech to elementary school students, that's just going to reinforce, one, your qualities as a human, and also your passion for the field. So that's a really great way to stand out and kind of help somebody see who you are beyond just what's on your resume. Next question is, do employers employ those who don't have certifications? Some companies care about this more than others, but generally, yes. In my experience, everyone I've talked to has said that certifications are great, experience is great, education is great, and they're usually looking for some combination of all of those things. So certifications are just one way that you can show your qualifications, and they are not generally going to make or break whether or not you get a job. So you can also make up for a lack of certifications by proving your competency through, again, projects and networking, so people know that you have those skills. So it's definitely not a disqualifier. And then the last question that I want to go over before opening it up to you all for the last 20 or so minutes is, do accomplishments such as this course lose value over time? And this, again, also can really depend, but it certainly can be a risk, especially in tech, because things are changing so rapidly. So my recommendation is, if you are job searching, then keep your skills sharp. Find tech blogs that you like, follow them on LinkedIn, or on your favorite tech blogs. Keep taking free online courses just to keep your skills sharp, and talk to people who work in the fields, because they're going to be able, a lot of times they'll know about things before it's really widely publicized. So you can kind of get an insider's take on things that you can do to keep your skills sharp. So it depends on the accomplishment. But if you're job searching for more than a couple months, it is good to kind of pick the books back up and make sure that you're staying on top of everything that is coming up in the field. So that is what I have for you, and I want to answer some of your questions. So I'm going to get out of here and go back to the video. Great. All right. So some questions came in. So the first one is, when you are a beginner in the tech field, what do you say when they ask what salary do you expect? Should you look up the range of how much people make for that position and ask for the lower number? Great question. So sometimes salary negotiations happen at the end of an application process, but you should be prepared to answer this question as early as the first contact that you have with a company. A lot of companies will ask about salary expectations on the front end, just to make sure that they're not wasting your time and you're not wasting their time, and that you are, kind of have the same idea in mind. So you should do research on this, definitely before you go in, ideally before you apply, but before you have any type of interview or contact with a recruiter. So I think the best way to skirt this question early on, you kind of want to avoid being the first person to put out a number. So if you can flip this around on them in a way that allows you to get away with not giving a direct answer, that is always my recommendation. And it's kind of tricky. So something that you could say, if somebody says to you, what are your salary expectations? You can say, I'd really like to learn more about this position and how my skills can be an asset to your company before I share my salary expectations. But from doing my research, I know that the range that your company offers falls in line with my general expectations. And they might keep pressing and they might ask for a number. And if you're really backed into a corner and you have to give them a number, I recommend giving them a range. Don't sell yourself short, even if you're a beginner and this might be your first job in the field. Know what the value of that position is. And I always say, ask for a little bit higher. You don't want to be, thousands and thousands of dollars above what you could expect to get paid, because you want to be realistic. But be bold. Don't sell yourself short. Most companies their initial offer could be a little bit lower than what they actually can pay, because it's obviously in their best interest to hire somebody for less money, and it's in your best interest to get hired for more money. So it's a little bit of a game, and you definitely want to play into that. So don't sell yourself short, but also be realistic and do your research. Glassdoor is a great resource. Next question is, if you have a lot of years of experience and have joined many projects, how should you pick which one to put on your resume to keep it to only one page? Great question. You probably won't be able to fit all of your experience on your resume. That's okay. Pick the things that are most relevant. So if you are applying to a job and Java is a really important skill that they're looking for, put projects on your resume that highlight your Java experience. You can probably leave off things that involve skills or languages that they're not looking for at all, especially if you don't have room on your resume. So the answer to this really depends on the job that you're applying for and should change with every job that you apply for. Next question. I have been told that an addendum is acceptable on a resume listing soft skills. What are your thoughts on this? So I think, and I don't know if I've ever seen an addendum specifically with a resume. So I am assuming that this question's asking like a separate page or a separate document highlighting your soft skills. I don't really think it's necessary. Again, when you're writing your power statements, you can kind of highlight some of your soft skills. So if teamwork is a strength of yours, make sure that you talk about times that you worked in a team. And if that's what the job that you're applying for is looking for, highlight that experience that you have, and that will bring out your soft skills. And then, ideally, the resume is just a way to get you an interview. And that's an opportunity where you can share even more stories about your soft skills and experiences. If you include an addendum with your resume, it's really likely that it won't even get looked at. So I would say don't worry about that. And I think there's other ways that you can highlight your soft skills without having a separate, document or add-on for it. Next question is, do you have any cover letter tips? What if a company doesn't require one? If a company doesn't require one, my advice is to always write one anyway. Unless the company specifically says do not submit a cover letter, it's just a great way to show that you really care about the job opportunity. Companies want to hire people who are qualified, but they also want to hire people who are really excited about working there and who are excited about the job. And if you're going to go above and beyond and take the time to write a cover letter, then that can only work in your favor. So some tips for writing cover letters: they also should only be one page. They also should be super tailored to the job description. I do the same thing for cover letters that I do for resumes, and that I print out the job description. I have a highlighter and I just go through it and highlight all of the experience I have. I try to find the things in the job description that I think are most important to the role. Generally, job descriptions will have their main priorities first. And so you could assume that the things that come first in the job description are probably most important to the employer. So I try to answer or speak to my experience in those areas. And yeah, keep it specific, keep it brief and concise, and whenever possible, try to figure out who the hiring manager is for the role that you're applying to. So if you know somebody at the company, ask. If you've talked to a recruiter at that company, ask them. That's okay. You can try to figure it out on LinkedIn, but it's just a really great way to show that you've done your research and stand out. And then more of a formatting tip: if you do have your resume in a specific format, make sure that your cover letter is formatted in the same way. It's just another way to kind of reflect your professional brand. So the next question is, can you be overqualified for a job? Yes, you can. Sometimes this is okay, and sometimes companies will be worried that especially if you're applying to like a more high profile company, they might be worried that you're applying for a job that's below your skill set to get your foot in the door and that you won't be staying on the team for a while. So I would say, one, for yourself, apply to jobs that are a good match for your skills, that will challenge you, and that won't require you to take a huge pay cut or anything like that. And there's no reason to apply for a job that's below your skill set. Even if you really want to get your foot in the door at a company, I would say the best way to do that is, again, through networking and not applying to a junior level position when you're qualified for a mid or a senior level position. The next question is LinkedIn important to have? Would an employer ignore an applicant if they don't have a LinkedIn link? Yes, LinkedIn is extremely important to have. I don't know if all employers would ignore an applicant, but a lot, especially in tech, I mean, recruiters and tech companies use LinkedIn religiously. And if you don't have a LinkedIn, if they can't find you, that could be a red flag. LinkedIn is a technical tool, and if you're applying for jobs in a technical field, then being well versed in some of the most common technical tools is just another way to back up your qualifications. So yes, you should have a LinkedIn, and if you don't, making one is super easy. It's also a really great resource for you to find people to connect with, to build your network, to learn about jobs, to follow companies. If you follow companies on LinkedIn, sometimes they'll post jobs to their company pages before they post it to the main job boards, or boards like Indeed and Monster and things like that. So it's also just a really great tool and resource for you. So yes, everybody should have a LinkedIn. There's really no reason not to, because it's a professional tool. So even if you have hesitations about social media, LinkedIn isn't really social media. So I definitely recommend that everybody has one. The next question is, should awards and distinctions from college be part of your resume? And I would say that depends. If you had a really prestigious award from your college, like if you studied engineering and you won your capstone project or something like that, that could be a really great thing to have on your resume. I would say in general, the farther away you are from your education, the less important it becomes on your resume. So if you graduated college 30, 40 years ago, you probably don't need to have scholarships or awards or things like that you got on your resume. But if you just graduated school a couple years ago and you're still relatively new in the field, by all means, have those things on there. I think it really depends on how much space you have on your resume, how relevant those awards are to the field, and just how long ago it was. So next question is, after submitting the resume, how long should the resume stage process typically take? This one totally depends on the company. The last company that I worked at, the process took 3 months from when I applied to when I got an offer. With Udacity, it was less than a month. So, it really depends on the company that you're applying to. Bigger companies sometimes can move faster. They can also sometimes move slower because they have a larger volume of applicants. So you can ask early on if you have concerns about the timeline for any reason. Be open. If you apply to a job and you don't hear back after a week or two, send an email, follow up. Same thing if you have an interview. Always you want to send a thank you message after your interview. But if you haven't heard back after a week, then it's totally appropriate to follow up, once a week or so, just to check in on the progress of your application and ask that on the front end. Employers are generally really understanding that your time is valuable, and you might need to know how long you can expect the process to take. Next question, I think we have time for probably two more. I'm finishing a master's degree in an unrelated field, and should I focus my LinkedIn profile towards tech or my other field? Having both is confusing, and I have the feeling they are disconnected. That is a great question, and it really depends on what you want a career in. So if you're getting your master's degree and you've realized that you don't want to pursue a career in the field that you're getting your master's degree in, your LinkedIn should probably be focused on the job that you want. However, if you did the challenge course just to build up your tech skills and just to kind of round out your resume, grow individually as a person, then cater your LinkedIn towards the field that you're getting your master's in. You get to decide what you want people to see about your professional brand and what stands out to them about you. So it really depends on what you want to do. You can also, the summary section of a LinkedIn is also a really great place to clarify why your education might differ significantly from what you're looking for, or this is true for people who are transitioning from one field to another. You can explain what your background is, and why you're looking to transition into the tech field. And so that can kind of answer some questions that somebody might have when they look at your profile and they're like, wait a second, this person is studying atmospheric sciences, but they're applying for a job as an Android developer. What's going on here? So you can explain that away in your LinkedIn profile and in the summary section of your resume, if you do include a summary. And then probably the last question that we'll have time for is, do you have any job site recommendations? There are a million, yes, off the top of my head, and I can put together a list and share this out with people. Indeed is a great one. LinkedIn is honestly my number one, and it's so great because, like I said before, if you follow companies on LinkedIn, you oftentimes will be one of the first people to hear about job opportunities before they're posted to public sites. Dice is a great one. Hired.com is a really good one. Believe it or not, Craigslist. Sometimes there can be some kind of sketchy jobs on Craigslist, so make sure that you're vetting them. But lots of companies advertise jobs on Craigslist, so that can be a great place to go. Trying to think of ones that I haven't said already. Monster, I don't know if I said that one. That is what comes to mind right now, but I have a more comprehensive list and I'm happy to share that. And this isn't necessarily a website, but again, your network. People that you know who work at tech companies or who are connected to people who work at tech companies. Maybe you don't know somebody who works at a company you want to work at, but one of your friends knows somebody there. that's going to be a great person to, kind of keep you in the loop when opportunities open up. The past couple jobs I've had, I was notified of them from somebody who worked at the company. So I didn't necessarily know that those jobs were available until after I talked to somebody. So word of mouth in your network is really going to be the most valuable tool in terms of helping you get your foot in the door, giving you advice on how you can improve your resume or your portfolio to stand out. They're going to help you find out about job opportunities. They can put in good words for you with hiring managers. So I really want to emphasize networking a lot, just as a way to supplement all of your career resources, including your resume, your LinkedIn, your interviewing skills, your portfolio, everything like that. Well, we are about to wrap up. I just want to thank everyone who attended this. Thank you for your questions. There were some really, really great ones, and I know we didn't have a chance to get through all of them today. So if we didn't get to yours, I apologize, but I definitely encourage you to check out the appropriate Slack channel. All of the different workspaces have specific career-oriented channels, and your peers have a ton of experience. So even if this is your first time in tech, there's tons of people in these courses who have been working in tech for a while, either maybe in the field that you want to get into or in different fields that can share some additional awesome advice. So use each other. You all have a really powerful network through being in this course together, and take advantage of that. Ask questions, share ideas, and use each other. This is one of the most valuable resources that you have, is the community that you've built here. So take advantage of that, and thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your Friday. Bye, everyone.